Welcome to episode number 3 of David's Saturday Night Sit Back. Today, I have on Nat Rogachevsky. He is a stand-up comedian here in Austin. He is the co-creator of TV Sketch Show. He is the co-host of Slam Time Live, a podcast that's available wherever you listen to your podcasts. And today, he's here with me to talk about life. Nat, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, man.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
So I did a pretty deep dive into your Instagram. I'm very curious how many pull-ups your grandpa can do these days.
He's probably more than ever, to be honest with you. I think he's in better shape now than when I posted. That is a phenomenal deep dive. This is probably the first Nardwar moment that I've had.
What's that? What's Nardwar?
Nardwar is a music journalist who interviews various musicians, and he's renowned for his journalistic abilities to find specific information that continues to stun the people that he interviews, of how they think he's to the extent they think he's working with the police because the stuff that he knows about is so deep. And so, although yes, this was just a dive on the Instagram, I am impressed that you found the video of my grandfather doing 10 pull-ups, which I think he could probably do 15 now.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I want to become like this guy.
Yeah.
During the day, I'm a recruiter, so I think it helps because I'm used to just digging up information on people, not to a point where I think the creepiest one is mostly just finding phone numbers. I'm really good at that. And if there's a candidate I find on LinkedIn, I really want to talk to them, I'll shoot them a text or sometimes even just call the number. Unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is I'll get their brother, their spouse, their cousin. So the information is close, but then the family member gets all upset. I'm like, I'm sorry. Yeah. But yeah, Instagram is a great place to go. And I scrolled through your first original 20 or so posts, and he reminds me a little bit of Lloyd. Did you watch Yellowstone?
Very briefly. I don't know if I'm familiar with Lloyd.
Okay. He just reminds me of this very badass cowboy where he may be 65, 70, but he's still acting, and operating like he's 30.
Sure.
So kudos to Grandpa.
Thank you.
Is he doing well?
Yeah, he's killing it.
Awesome.
Yeah, him and Grandma are awesome.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
All right, next deep dive question. You potentially, and not to kick this off with a sore subject, but I might, so I apologize in advance. You bombed at a comedy club here in Austin, 20 minutes away, called The Creek in the Cave in September of 21. Do you remember that night?
No, but I believe you.
It was just a post basically saying I bombed, but then you had a couple friends in your comment section were like, no, you do great. Since you don't remember that night, we'll say maybe you did somewhere in the middle, right? Your friends were being nice. Maybe you didn't do your greatest, but I'm curious in general, when you do bomb on stage, what's your mindset afterwards? As soon as you get off the stage, are you beating yourself up, or are you just what's going through your head in that moment?
So I think I remember the picture that you're referring to. I believe that specific picture was in a room called Barrels and Amps in Georgetown, specifically. That picture is from the first time that I ever bombed, because I was just so situated that when I started comedy in Boston, I kind of hit the ground running, where I had a few jokes that were working right up top. And it's all dog shit now compared to the stuff I'm producing. But there wasn't a lot of options. And the few shows that I had got booked on were just happened to be really hot rooms that I got away with some decent sets, mostly on personality and kind of a unsubstantiated bravado. So stuff was working. And I went to this show that my buddy Spencer, who's the co-host of my podcast, produces. And I bombed so hard that I didn't sleep that night. And I remember being 2 minutes in, and I tried to riff up top with just some horrible observations that didn't work at all. Nobody liked it right away. And I'm 2 minutes into the set, and no one has laughed, even at all. And I'd been doing comedy at this time for 3 months. And, man, it's gross, man. And then here's the thing. It takes about 2 minutes to realize how hard you're bombing. It takes 30 seconds to figure out, this isn't going well. You're like, why'd you trudge along? Something's going to get them. And it does not, because you're wearing your pain and fear on your sleeve, and they know. And so you're sweating in the back of the neck. That's common, and it's very scary. And no matter how hard you try to turn it around, you just can't. And that was the experience that I had. And then I got off stage, and my now good friend Spencer shook my hand. He goes, yeah, they're weird tonight. And then our mutual friend Miles went up and crushed. immediately afterwards. So it was all me. There is no blaming the crowd. I made a lot of mistakes. It's a horrible, horrible feeling. It's an absolutely necessary feeling because, you know, I then watch and see what I did wrong.
Yeah.
Make sure I never do that again. It doesn't happen nearly as much, but today I am more critical of my work than I've ever been, and I've gotten off stage of they've been laughing the whole time, and all of my friends say, great set, etc., 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 you murdered, blah, 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 all the words that we kind of throw around kind of willy-nilly. And I'm so harshly critical of my work that if I felt like I was just disconnected, or I didn't like my pacing, or if I forgot one joke, or if I just didn't feel present, I hate it almost as much as that feeling that when I actually bombed. So my relationship with it has changed a lot. Today, I've just learned how to be so critical that it's almost completely analytical, and there's a lot less emotion attached to it. Where although, yes, that lack of control that is the thing that hurts the ego, where it's like, that didn't go exactly how I wanted it to. It's just ego, right? It is painful, of course. But today I'm able to just go, okay, well, watch the tape. Where did you make your mistakes? What was wrong with your energy? Did you miss something? Did you misread the room? What was it? That's where I'm at. When I got off stage then, when I like truly bombed in September of 2021, I just want to kill myself. Like, it was just like the worst feeling ever. You know, and today I'm just able to kind of like look at it a little more transactionally and matter-of-factly, even when I don't do well.
Yeah.
So I think that answers.
Yes, it does.
All right.
Yes, it does. I wonder how much you think the crowd plays into it. And what I mean by that is, I went to a comedy club with a friend recently, and the comedian was making fun of a group of people, and I don't think she had seen me in the room yet. And at the end of the punchline was talking about how the epitome of this person is bald white men with long beards. And as soon as she said it, she just happened to lock eyes with me. And for me, I thought it was hilarious. So I was in tears laughing. The crowd loved it. But I could see how if it wasn't me, if it was someone else who maybe was that stereotype, because stereotypes exist for a reason, you know, because there's someone displayed that behavior at some point. But I could see that also, you know, the crowd going like, oh, like she just made fun of her own audience member. So do you think content or your work just kills in one room and then you pitch the exact same thing again to a different crowd and it just is demoralizingly terrible? Does that happen?
Yeah, it's not that black and white. I think that I find it really important to like know my crowd or try to like learn about them. So I like to watch the comics that were before. I know some comics that they don't watch, you know, they just go up and they do their jokes exactly the same no matter what. And there's something that I admire about that, but not necessarily that I seek to emulate. Like, I like to know the crowd that I'm working in front of and see where they're at, and I might even adjust what I plan to do based on the crowd. So, for example, if it's like a young crowd and I see the dirty stuff isn't working as well based on the comics before them, maybe I don't lead with it. Maybe I introduce myself a little better, or I touch on the room, or I open up with some stuff that is a little more palatable. And now they like me, and now I can trick them into liking the dirty stuff because they already are on board. They've already decided that they enjoy me. Now it's up to me to lose that trust or continue to facilitate it. So it's like kind of, you know, I kind of consider where I'm at and consider who I'm talking to. And I also make it clear that I'm in the same room as them. That's something that was taught to me like really early on. That if you have something to riff up top with, or a joke that's prevalent, that's relevant to the room or the scenario, or maybe there's been a heckler the whole time and something's been discussed with the act before something, you can continue that. Whatever. If you can let them know, hey, we're all in the same space together, I am aware of your existence, that's really valuable. And there are some guys who just shoot their same stuff straight down the middle, and maybe they like them, maybe they don't. Maybe they like some stuff, maybe they don't, and that's all well and good. But I like to be present. That's, for me, I can't really enjoy the experience if I'm not. And if I'm not having a good time, they're not having a good time, or they're not having as good of a time as they could. So I like to think about where I'm at. And then there are times where most of the time it's something that I have done incorrectly that would make them dislike me. Younger comics, myself included, tend to get combative when a crowd doesn't like them. Oh, it's you guys. You guys don't get it. That's really dumb.
And I don't like that angle. That's rough.
Yeah, and it's just the same thing. You're protecting your ego.
Yeah.
You guys don't get it. Not maybe that. Oh, I didn't even. I let people know that I'm happy to be here. I make it clear that I'm grateful to be on a stage performing for them. And I also remember that I am performing for them. No matter how much I am self-righteous in my art and my artistic integrity, I am the sad clown. That's the truth of this business. Yeah. And so when people are like, I was like, well, you just fucking were mean to them. And to your point, in terms of dealing with the heckler, that's a thing that is real skill. How can you deal with a crowd to make it clear that you are the entertainer without being mean? Because you can be punchy, you can make fun of somebody without being mean. Like, look at Rickles. No one felt like he actually didn't like them. It's all leads with love. Yeah. Even when he's making fun of your race or your height or your appearance, you can tell the love is there. A great example of which is a guy like Phil Hanley. If you're not familiar with his work, check it out. I think he's the best crowd worker in the country because he is able to handle almost any situation without really eloquently and really hysterically without ever seeming like he's actually upset. And that's that fine line that, that's just a lifetime of experience in comedy to get good at. Yeah. Like how do you keep the ball in the air, have fun with the situation that's happening, still maintain control, and not turn anybody off? For example, listen, if I'm dealing with a heckler who's right here, right in front of me, 99.9% of the crowd doesn't even hear them. And I'm like, hey, fuck you, man. And now everyone in the crowd who was having a great time is like, oh, is there a problem? Well, there wasn't. It was just me and my ego. So that's the kind of stuff that I take a look at, and I consider that kind of stuff. That's why a lot of comics just brush over when there's just one guy being annoying and let the club handle that. But, and then in terms of the material itself, if I can get you to like me, you're going to like whatever I have to say. You know what I mean? Yeah. If I'm considering who you are. But, yeah.
To your point, the club did do, the night that we were there, and there's the guy heckling at the comedian, the guards, the bouncers, whatever you'd call them, they got him out and we didn't even realize. So when she got off stage and the next guy got on, his opening joke was about, did you guys even realize? And you could see the whole room because the guy was in the center of the room. Mm-hmm. And so we all turn and he's like, sure as shit, he's gone. And it ended up being a great joke. So both comedians bounced back from that particular instance very impressively. So one question I had was, when we were at Cap City that night, is for all four comedians, for every single joke, there's a person sort of in the back of the room near the middle, and every joke, ha 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 ha, like she thought everything was funny. And me and my buddy walked out of there wondering if, do comedy clubs insert laughers to sort of get like that? Remember the old TV shows in the 90s where the crowd would laugh whenever someone... Did comedy clubs ever do that?
I don't think so.
No, so she just genuinely was having a fantastic evening.
Yeah.
That's good for her. That makes me even happier.
Some people are such good laughers. There are people that can carry a crowd like that. There are people that are your saving grace, that remind everybody that this is a comedy show. People like that. There are people whose laughs are so good they make other people laugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. It's great when it's like that. It makes things fun.
You might find one of my friends finds this weird, but I love comedy, but I will never watch it at home because the reason is I live here with my dog.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, a big part of what brings me joy is being in a room full of people and we're all laughing together. Theo Von was on Joe Rogan recently, and I loved his episode. So I had 2 specials on Netflix, and I wanted more Theo.
Yes.
So I turned them on, and I got maybe 12 minutes into it and thought this is bullshit and turned it
Yeah.
off. Whereas if you came over with maybe 3 or 4 more friends and we all watched it together, I'd probably love it. But watching it alone, it just like that. I don't know, man. It doesn't do anything for me.
You happen to pick a comic who I won't say has a reputation, but in terms of my perspective, is much stronger. I don't think his specials reflect his act. Now, that's true for everyone to some degree. Some people say you're getting about 60% of the experience when you're watching a special because that X factor is the sharing it live with other people. And that is, of course, true for everybody. But I think he's specifically a comic. I've heard that special didn't do his work justice. But I love seeing live stand-up.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite things to do. Thank God, like a lot of people who do comedy can't watch as much comedy. And I get that, but I don't know. I just admire so many people in this business.
Yeah.
And there's so many unique perspectives. And there's so many, like I have to see what's possible out there. So I ingest a lot of stand-up, including at home. I watch a lot of specials. If I know I'm not going to be able to see it for a while, I'll watch a lot of stuff.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we could probably go back and forth on this for a while. I don't know if you know this. It's been 17 minutes already, so time is flying by.
Nice.
I am really excited to have you on because I met you very briefly when you did at the Creek in the Cave. You guys premiered the TV sketch show. That was a hilarious night. I was actually there on a date that night, and the date portion didn't go well at all.
Nice.
Afterwards, I guess the 6th Street has a reputation for once it gets to be like midnight or later, a lot of fights break out there. So we finished at the comedy club, and then afterwards he asked me, he's like, do you want to go get a couple drinks, and then we'll go over to 6th Street and fuck some shit up? And I was
How's your date?
And I said, what? And he was like, let's go get in a fight on 6th Street. And I thought it was a joke, like, let's make this interesting, like a little icebreaker, And I was like, I was just going to go home, man. Like, it's a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And he's like, you'll feel a lot better if you woke up knowing you kicked some ass last night. And I was like, what is happening? No.
That's crazy.
So, but it made for a funny story.
That's great.
That being said, so I learned about you. I met you very briefly at the Creek in the Cave, and then started up this podcast. To your point, wanted to do it in person because I think there's a magic to people coming together and having some drinks and talking one-on-one versus over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Don't like that scenario. And so to do some research on you, I listened to a couple of other podcasts where you had been a guest. And I really want to talk today about habit building and vulnerability, a word I can't say, but I want to talk about it, and building community and why community is really important for anyone and everyone. Every human on this planet, I think, needs to be proactive about thinking about who's in my community. Should I be building on it? Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? So I'm very, very excited to get your take on these things. Just so that the audience has a little bit of context that I do, could you talk to me a little bit about your past, your heroin usage, what got you, sort of what you've been up to the last 6 years, and sort of just give us a couple minutes, download on who is Nat and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because I think that, my history of addiction and my pursuit of recovery is an integral part of my life. So I can't really tell that story without discussing it. And so I think really I truly don't consider my life having started until I got sober. That's my personal experience. Because what I learned in getting sober was, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Like, I really didn't have a life to speak of before I got sober. And even in like all the events leading up to like the thickness of the really, really scary part of my addiction, it was I just don't remember many meaningful things. I have a few relationships that I still have outside of my family, a couple friendships that I still keep up with, but really it was just trouble, and it was just a lot. It was just a lack of purpose and like real aimlessness. And frankly, the addiction was just a byproduct of a spiritual malady that I was experiencing. I just didn't feel part of anything to bring it into community. And so when I was introduced to drugs and alcohol at a young age, it felt as though that's what felt normal, because it felt so abnormal to be me up to that point. And so when I get to opiates and heroin, at that point it was just like kind of a natural conclusion to me always seeking something to get out of myself, because it was so incredibly painful to be myself. And that was just a predisposed malady. You know, I don't really prescribe to schools of thought. Like, of course there is some validity to addiction and alcoholism being hereditary, that's for sure. But I think you either have it or you don't. That's really been my experience. I don't think it's something that like develops or doesn't. You have this malady that you have found a solution for through drugs and alcohol, or you do not, you know, because I know people who were problem drinkers, right? And then the problem became great enough that they stopped, or they were able to control their drinking and drugging. The problem never got great enough that I stopped or was able to control my drinking or drugging, so it just continued until I lost everything. So by the end of my drinking and drugging, it's essentially me in a dirty room in an apartment that I shared with another addict, going on the streets to beg occasionally, stealing everything that I had that wasn't drugs, begging and hustling or scamming and stealing for anything that I needed to get high. And that's the entire focus of my life. I had no meaningful relationships. I'd isolated myself from anybody who still wanted to help me, which there still were. My family still that never gave up on me. But I did whatever I had to do to continue drinking and drugging. And so when I got to recovery and 12-step work, what I was introduced to was a sense of community and purpose that I didn't recognize as what I wanted the entire time. So first you get there and they're like, oh, there's people that feel like you. And that's kind of a profound experience, because what the disease of addiction does is it tries to convince you that you have a unique quality about yourself that has led you to be this way and behave this way. Well, if other people felt the way I felt, they would do what I did too. If you understood how difficult it was to be me, or you had all these problems, you'd also be consuming the way I do. All of these delusions that this disease tells you to keep you in its grips. It's like you know what I mean? It's like it's a virus in that sense, that it will do whatever it needs to do to survive. And so when I get to recovery, it's like there's these people who felt like I did, now they feel better, and it's this thing that you can barely believe. And so I get put into this community where they're like, hey man, if you do the stuff that we do, you get a big beautiful life, which just didn't seem possible. It's just not something that I thought could happen. It's not like I had all these examples of big beautiful lives outside of this. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like we come from relatively like modest background and stuff. No one was like super successful in our family. We were never like cold or hungry, but we were broke my whole life. And I see all these people and they're just like beaming, you know what I mean? They're doing so well. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, if you do the stuff that we do, for me specifically, it was 12-step work, going to meetings and all that stuff. They're like, you don't even know how good it can get. And so there's some blind faith involved, but the community was there to kind of support me as soon as I got there. And that's kind of what I try to practice today. So then I got introduced to like the tenets of service, and it's like you recognize that through engaging in this community and through putting others before yourself, that's where the real gift is. And through that, you know, that is what's given me this life today. I get this relationship with something greater than myself, that the best way to attain is through removing yourself from the equation. The best way I can do that is by trying to help somebody else. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's been my relationship with recovery for the past 5.5, 6 years. And it's been like a rocket ship, really. I would be like remiss to say that that's not, like, if you just look at the pattern of events, like everything from beginning was like, it was just always downhill or getting very low and then just staying there. And it's just like essentially a direct rocket ship up in every measurable category, right? I've got relationships back that I didn't think were possible, and they're stronger than ever. Like, I'm on the way over here on the phone with my cousin just shooting the shit. I thought like we might never talk again, the pain that I had caused. And it's like, we're better than ever. I babysit his kids. It's crazy. Yeah. They've never seen me drunk or on drugs, these kids. It's like, it's a freaking miracle. And there's people who rely on me today, which again is like, it's a like a complete 180. I was genuinely like useless, and now there's like really people who like rely upon my help, and I'm available. So for me, the way I look at it is I really put that work first. Everything else is secondary. It's like my recovery work, my relationship with a higher power, then my family, then my dreams, right? And I didn't start comedy till I got sober. So, when they tell you anything is possible when you get sober, that's like, they mean it, man. It's like I thought I was, I don't know if you knew this, but I was a recruiter.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I looked for you on LinkedIn because I wanted to try to get a sense of like, what did he do pre-comedy? I think I found you. There is a Nat in Austin, but there's zero data on the profile. So no, I had no idea.
Yeah, I was recruiting. I was full desk.
Hell yeah.
Within accounting and finance.
Robert Half?
Addison Group.
Okay, I've heard of them.
Yeah, I think their headquarters in Chicago, but I got that job through a sober friend, made a little bit of money. First to get let go during the pandemic, and I decided whatever I do next, I'm gonna love it. That was like the whole process with comedy. That's how I got into it. So I got laid off, and I was like, whatever I do next, I'm gonna genuinely love it. And it was like, what do I love? Let's stand up. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of community, it's like, it's vital. It's crucial. I can't do anything alone. And I need like an infinite power just to like make it through the day. And I can't access that power without like really engaging in the lives of others and considering others. So I'm very, very, very lucky that wherever I go, there's always a meeting and there's always a comedy club. I'm like, when I tell you my cup runs over, that's what I mean. Like, there's no place really in the planet that I can go and not have my people around,
Because AA at this point, I know it's prevalent in the United States, but is it a worldwide program? Yeah. Could you find meetings in Europe and Australia and most? Yeah, that's sweet. That's good.
And a lot of times English speaking too. And a lot of times not, and it's still good.
Well, I guess even if now that we're on COVID, there's probably still even online meetings, right? So even if you were in Europe, if you wanted to jump onto a US based,
which I don't recommend.
Meeting. Why is that?
The same reason why you didn't want to have this podcast over Zoom.
Gotcha. I get what you mean.
The piece is missing. I can't really connect with my fellows through a computer screen. And also there's a sacrifice that's necessary to getting the spiritual benefit of 12-step work, where a lot of time now, there are people who are significantly handicapped that cannot make it to a physical meeting. And for that, Zoom is a blessing.
Yep.
But for the most part, I can make the necessary time to drive the 15 minutes or even get there half an hour early so I can engage with my fellows, make myself available to the new guy, maybe stick around another 20 minutes, get some phone numbers. God forbid I call them, which is what we got to do, right?
Yep.
And it's like, or I can just conveniently find some meeting in Boca Raton, turn my camera off, and eat cereal while listening to people talk about God in the steps.
Yep.
And I just haven't found a ladder to like really do anything for me. I need to be able to hug you and tell you I appreciate you.
Yep.
And share information and ideas with you. And it's a sacrifice, man. Like I give a shit ton of my time and energy to the work and to people I sponsor and to being involved in my fellows. Like it's the number one thing, you know what I mean? Everything else is secondary. And if you were to look at it like, you know, people think that I work really hard in comedy. And I think I do. I could always work harder. But I think generally my reputation is that of like a really hardworking person within this business. And nothing comes before my recovery. In my experience, an alcoholic and an addict of my nature, anything that I put in front of my recovery, I will lose fairly quickly. So I do, and then because I talk to people and they're like, "Yeah, I'm too busy for X, Y, and Z." I'm like, "Dude, I got a big life. I got a big family. I got a lot of cool shit that I do. I always have time for my recovery, you know?"
It's interesting because a couple parallels, and hopefully you don't hate me for drawing these conclusions, is, you know, when you were talking about meetings and showing up early, I am right now, I just moved here from Sacramento, California. I had one friend who's here, who's technically not even my friend. I'm calling him my loner friend. So when
Friend of a friend?
Yep. So when she learned I was moving out to Austin, she was like, "Oh, Devin's there. I'll give him a heads up that you're coming and you two can hang out." I'm like, "I don't really even know Devin, but okay, sure. Great. Yeah, it'll be good." So I came out here not knowing anybody. And so I'm reading a book right now called, I want to say it's called Platonic, The Power of Friendships. And it's literally a book about just how to make friends. And one of the challenges that I've set for myself is to every day, either at the gym or at the dog park, I got to meet someone. Even if it doesn't go anywhere, it's still just breaking out of that fear of approaching someone in the gym. What if they don't like what I have to say, or what if it's weird? And there have been a few weird instances, but I bring it up because when you were talking about meetings, I was thinking about when I go to networking events, or if it's more structured than like just to work out at the dog park. If I go to an accounting event for work, I do the same thing. I show up 30 minutes early and I immediately start scanning the room, especially if I'm doing an event at a university, because I'm looking for that student that looks terrified.
Yeah.
They stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
They're by themselves. They're sweating. They're fidgeting with their resume. They're on their phone. You can tell like this person screams, "I don't want to be here."
Yeah.
And so I will go over to that person and I will introduce myself to them. I will bring them up to my competitors' tables, which weirds them out if it's like a job fair. And I'll be like, "All right, guys, this is Nat. He's an accountant. He's a sophomore. I want you to talk with him." And they're like, "Aren't you from Cone Resnick?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm introducing him to you guys because he's practicing this thing." And I've got some amazing feedback from people, not to my own horn, but just to say, like, when you go above and beyond and you're proactive about looking for the new person in the room, like, people really gravitate towards someone who's willing to give, to someone who shows up early. Like, I think when you were talking about how you attend meetings, you were basically, you know, describing someone that's proactive and intentional about how you're going about your program. And if anyone's sitting at home thinking, "Oh, I wish I had more friends," or "Why did I not get that invite out? Why is my social circle not as strong as I wish it was?" I would give you the hard truth and say back to you, what are you doing to build that circle? Have you invited anyone out? Have you hosted a party, or a dinner, a lunch? Have you gone to the dog park and just walked up to 3 strangers and said, "What's up? I'm new here. I have no friends. Can I hang out with you and your dog for a few minutes?" So I think that there's just a lot of parallels between what you said and just everyday people as well who just feel, especially after COVID, a little bit lonely, or, you know, whatever the thing is.
Yeah, I think that that's a great approach. I also think that you get pretty much the direct equivalent of what you give. So the more you give, the more you're going to get in any capacity, in any metric. Right. And so, and also I think about in comedy, like, I think about like how important it was to hear that I was doing the right thing from people that I admired, from people who I thought had something that I would never achieve that then I did. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, yeah, I'm a kind of funny guy, and yeah, I'm moving at an accelerated rate. But when people who I really was like, "Dude, you're a killer," and they'd say, "You crushed," to me, I remember the first time a headliner said that to me, I cried alone. And then I invited my girlfriend in this situation. I was like, "I can't believe this is happening. We're just a guy touring headliner. We happen to be on a showcase together. And he was like, you crushed. And it was so validating. And so today, when I meet with comics that, I'm not saying that I'm better or worse than anyone. They might just not be where I'm at currently in my career, which is fairly early in it, really. If I see someone who's funny, but like, they might not have the connections or the accessibility to stage time, or they're just not at that point in their career yet, but the jokes are there, I tell them. And I introduce them to people. I'm like, this guy's funny. This guy's clearly funny. In a year, he's going to be unstoppable. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, this guy's good. And I have so many friends like that. And I remember how much it meant to me when people were like, yeah, that joke's great. You can recreate that. You know how to do it now. And you can keep doing that if you keep trying. And so, I don't know. And that same thing, just kind of showing, just giving for the sake of giving is huge. And it was so not what the story was a few years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever heard of having an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And I have very much tried to be living with an abundance mindset of just give as much as you can. I don't live in that mindset anymore of like, oh, there's not enough to go around. When I introduce candidates to the competition, or even the other day I got on an interview with someone, and within 5 minutes I could tell he wouldn't want to work for us. So I was like, so let's talk about what you should do. And I could tell it took him aback a little bit, and because he was expecting me to try to hard close him on like, no, you're wrong. Don't chase what you want to do what I want to do, because I have a quota to fill. And so we ended up talking for 40-50 minutes about where he could go and what companies he could apply to and how could he find them. And it's funny because by giving, in a way, you're almost being selfish at the same time, because he in turn will remember me. And when one of his friends does want to work for a company like mine, he's going to remember me 3 years from now and be like, David's the first person you should go talk to.
In 6 years, he's going to be a hiring manager. You know what I mean? He's going to be a senior finance manager or a VP of finance in 8 years.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's a medium level company. He's going to have 3 openings, and he's going to reach out to you to fill them.
Yep.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's like it's just, the bucket can't just be full, because then you're just going to drink the water and then it will be empty. I like to look at it as like we're miners. We're mining for gold, and one guy fills up the bucket and then he passes it down the line, and then he drops it in your empty bucket, and then you pass it on to the next guy. And if you keep doing that, your bucket will always be full. But if you were just to get that bucket filled up and keep it, that is a finite amount. But if you continue to empty it, it will continue to be filled. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, and that's in terms of that abundance mindset. Like, I can. Absolutely. And it's just, it's freeing too. Like the truth is that they taught me that I should be selfless, or at least try to be, or pray to be, because that will keep me sober. And so I'm being selfless for selfish reasons. Then eventually through practice, you recognize the gift that you're being selfless for selfless reasons, because that feels good. It's not just about some kind of direct response that is tangible. It's oftentimes just it feels better to think about others than to be stuck in self. To be stuck in self is a pretty painful place to be, honestly. Yeah. And if I can try to help somebody else, it feels good. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's indirect where the dividends pay off. You never know what an act of service will do.
Yeah.
But it will pay back in some place or another. That's been my experience, and that's not just a philosophy. That has been my observed experience. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I feel very fortunate that I was in a position so difficult that I listened when they recommended stuff like this to me. You know what I mean? When people say I'm grateful to be an alcoholic, it seems like an oxymoron, but it is my truth. Because I wouldn't have any of the things I have if I, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I wasn't a booze bag.
In my 20s, I was raised a Christian and came out of the closet when I was 26 years old. And from 20 to 30, I always felt very, very sorry for myself, and I hated the fact that I was gay, and I hated the fact that I had this idea that I was going to hell, and it was victim, 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 victim. And now I'm on a completely other side of it, where I feel I'm not comfortable in my own skin to this day. You know, there are still some times where I have to tell someone that I'm gay, or I like men, or someone makes a comment about a woman, or, you know, I don't know. The fear is essentially that they will react like some of my friends did in their 20s, reject me, and then I just lost that friendship, which for me is crushing, because my bank account is not how I value my worth. My worth I value through who are the people in my life that I have strong relationships with. That being said, now I just hope, man, that my story, you know, is heard by some teenager, and maybe years before I can. They can learn from me and hopefully just accept themselves sooner than I did, and hopefully get jump started on life quicker than I did. I'm trying to think about what you said specifically, Matt, that made me bring that up, but that's neither here nor there. With that being said, let's get talking about habit building a little bit. So I would imagine that if you looked at your life 6 years ago, right before you found recovery and AA, versus today, life probably looks pretty different. Yes. So I read a book recently called Tiny Habits. It's by BJ Fogg. If anyone wants to check it out, go for it. It's a great book. But in chapter 1, I think pretty early on, he talks about 3 steps to changing your behavior. And I want to go through them one by one with you and just sort of see if you've applied any of these and sort of what your thoughts are around them. So step number 1 to habit building: stop judging yourself. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm torn, because there's a difference between judging yourself and being mean to yourself. So I try not to be mean to myself. One of the old sayings that I've heard thrown around is, man, if someone else spoke to you the way you're speaking to yourself, you'd fight them. You know what I mean? And I practice that. And I try to. Sometimes I can get hard on myself. But my only goal, especially in the business that I'm in, I don't have any tangible goals. It's not like I want to be here in 5 years. I just want to be a better comic than I am today, tomorrow. And the only way I can do that is by being fiercely critical of myself and my work. Now, I can, like we talked about earlier, I can do that without dampening my own self-value. You know what I mean? So I can look at, oh, you made a mistake here. This joke, it's not cutting it. You got to get rid of this, or this needs a new ending, or the middle is really stale in this piece, or you got to rearrange that set. You're losing them here, and I don't know why you're still doing that stuff, or this is really good punchline. You should think of a better tag. Whatever it is. I'm in a constant state of thinking about my act in that way. I'm fiercely judgmental in that sense. But no part of it is like, when I can't figure out the joke, I'm never like, you're an idiot.
Right.
The part that I do have imposter syndrome often, which I think a lot of us we're egomaniacs with inferiority complexes. You know what I mean? I'm either the best or the worst.
Yep.
Recovery and a relationship with God really help keep me right-sized and recognize I'm just some guy. Maybe I'm better at specifically doing stand-up than people who don't do stand-up, but like, that means nothing. And that helps a lot. That I can really grow from that. But often I can fall into some like imposter syndrome behaviors. And I've found that that's really universal amongst a lot of comics. Even people who are at the elite level have felt that way, which is very assuring. You know what I mean?
Yep. I
listen to a lot of like comedy podcasts, and I think about I listen to like my heroes talking about a set not going well 20 years in, and I'm like, oh, thank God. But I don't know if this is one of the ones that's coming up, but I would say that much more valuable than that is not judging others. Because that is a truly fruitless endeavor that I have yet to see have any kind of benefit. But that's my answer.
It's almost like instead of thinking about it as stop judging yourself, it could be that the only person you should compare yourself to is the yesterday version of you, which is what you said. And one of the best examples that someone gave me, because again, if you're listening to this, we're talking about changing your habits for anybody. If you want to be a better recruiter, a better comedian, a better member of AA, if you want to start a business, a better husband, a better wife, I think it's all habit driven. I heard a stat once back in like 2019, so I can't cite the source, but they said that 40% of our daily actions are habit driven. And I believe that, when I wake up every morning, I have a list of questions next to my bed I ask myself. I go through those mentally. I grab my coffee, grab my dog, back in bed. A few minutes later, it's brushing the teeth. It's then getting breakfast. Like the first hour of my day is so programmed, it's almost scary, which is why I wanted to talk about habits today. Because if you think about what you do throughout the day, and you're proactive about it, I think you can start to accomplish whatever that goal is that you're trying to get to. But the example he gave of why you shouldn't compare yourself to others was in the gym. He's like, you're comparing yourself to that guy. But first of all, you're probably not the same age. You probably have a different ethnic background. You probably have a different sleep routine. You probably ate different food. You probably have different supplements that you take. He was like, there's so many different data points that comparing yourself to Nat and why you think you're inferior because Nat's quicker, stronger, whatever it is, that comparison doesn't even make any logical sense at all.
Right. And I hate to harken it back to comedy every time. It's just something I'm so hyper obsessed with.
Yep.
It's really pointless because it's a real waste of time and energy to focus on those things. That's why kind of keeping it inward I think is so valuable. And in terms of what you're bringing up earlier, in terms of not being critical of the person you were yesterday, I think there's a difference between having guilt or shame or something like that versus recognizing like, okay, well, here's how I act differently to get a better result in terms of the habit piece. So pain is inevitable. It's part of existence, especially if you're looking to grow. If you are looking to get better at anything, you cannot do so without pain. It's a yin and yang situation. You can't just get better. You have to make mistakes regularly to grow. So the pain is inevitable. The suffering, that's an option. So I don't need to suffer from my pain. I can just experience it, recognize that too shall pass, and learn from it. Yeah. So the suffering piece, that's up to me. I can isolate and go down rabbit holes with the best of them. You know what I mean? I have depression that I choose not to medicate. You know what I mean? People have recommended it. But for me, those routines, they're the greatest adversary to my depression. I actually heard this in a meeting today. I've never thought myself into right action. I have only acted myself into right thinking.
Say that one more time.
So I've never thought myself into right action, but I have acted myself into right thinking.
I love that.
It's tremendous. It's
That's
tremendous because
awesome.
I know on a bad day, maybe for example, a big bad habit that I maintain that I struggle with more than anything for sure is food. For sure, I'm the least disciplined when it comes to food. I have developed some pretty good, and we can get into it more, but I've developed some solid routines, solid habits, and continue to do so in a lot of areas in my life. Food is by far my biggest struggle, without a doubt. Now, can I do the next right thing even if I'm experiencing the negative of having an unhealthy relationship with food? So I have yet to let food get in the way of me picking up the phone when an alcoholic calls, being of service. Oftentimes I'll still get my ass to the gym just to do that. And like, I might have a bad morning because I ate like shit last night. And maybe that bleeds into another day. Maybe, truly. But I can get myself into the gym and I will feel better. That's a guarantee. So you can make mistakes in your process, because it's, I mean, to have like a really, it's not easy to develop like a really solid routine life in all of these different areas. There's a lot of stuff to balance, but I'm there's a lot of areas I'm pretty solid, and they help the ones where I'm not, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. In Alcoholics Anonymous, I know they have the phrase one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not thinking about not drinking for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Just today, Nat's not going to drink. That's all you're worried about. And as I was thinking about that concept, I was also thinking about the New Year's resolutioners at the gym who they haven't been to the gym in 6 months. And maybe it's not even a New Year's resolution. You know, they just have that epiphany of, I need to work out. And so they go and they get the bag, the matching clothes, the supplements, the gym membership.
Sure.
They do like 9 different things.
That's me,
it's just like balls to the wall. And then they're in there every day for like 3 months. And then you don't see them again for like 3 years.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important for us, instead of going setting these huge goals, could you talk to me a little bit about both inside AA but also outside? Instead of going nuts with it, why not just slow down a little bit and take it a little slower? What's the reasoning behind that, and how does that potentially lead to more success?
Well, real change happens gradually. No true change happens overnight. And I actually talk about this a little bit in a different sense. I talk about this in a social aspect in my act a little bit, about a new radical idea might be presented into our current lexicon or whatever, and that's fine. But then the expectation for that to be implemented and adopted by people whose whole lives didn't look like that is crazy. So a true change happens gradually, and a lot of the times real change, especially on a social level, happens generationally. So maybe I'm not at the point where you'd like me to be, but my kids might be. Something like that, right? And I talk about that. And I do it in a actually much more crude and silly way in what I'm referring to in the act. But in terms of, and I think that some people are really like goal driven, and I appreciate that. Like, I know people who are like, I want to have a 6-pack by in X amount of months or whatever. I think people don't really recognize how hard it actually is to have a 6-pack. It is one of the most difficult things you can do.
I think that's the only thing I've set to accomplish in the gym that I've never accomplished.
It's bananas. Because the truth is, because that it's in the kitchen too.
Right.
So, and that's much more of it. Yeah, for me, what I want my goal to be is just to be healthier, you know. And so what that means is trying to improve on my routine in the gym and in my eating. And so the reason is that it's simply much easier to make a good decision right now than it is over an extended period of time. So as it relates to drinking, when I got sober, it was impossible to imagine being sober for as long as I've been sober. I remember seeing people get a 3-month chip and think they were superheroes. It baffled me, because if you felt how I felt, like, it's I couldn't believe it. And I can't imagine that. But when I'm in a meeting or I'm getting pizza afterwards, which is equally important, you should really, if you're listening and you're doing recovery and you're not engaging with your fellows, which is so difficult to do when you isolate by nature and you're selfish and self-centered, and all you want to do is remove yourself from anybody who might interfere with all those painful thoughts that led you to drink in the first place. Go out there and go find the guys that want to get pizza and go to concerts and do all the fun stuff that you're allowed to do when you're sober, because that was super duper important to me. That was a huge part of my early recovery. Anyway, I couldn't imagine a life without drinking, but tonight, because when I first got sober, here's what every day looked like, right? I got up and I prayed, which I still do every day. That's what they told me to do, so I just did it, regardless of if I didn't know what I was praying to, or doesn't matter. They told me to pray, so I prayed. And I didn't know how to pray, so I just asked a couple people, and they're like, say this, just try it, whatever. Fine. Okay, I'll do it. I have no options left. And I woke up in a sober house. I was paying way too much money to live in a bedroom with 3 other men or 2 other men. Flop house. Get on a train. 45 minutes to work. Another half an hour to a meeting. And then 45 minutes back every day. And after the meeting, I'd go rather hang out with some other alcoholics, and I'd go home every day. Something like this. And I couldn't imagine doing 2 months of that. But what I could is like, okay, I'm on the train. I'm going to work. I know I'm going to work. I won't drink there. And if I feel like drinking, they told me to call. I got a phone list of people that have been gracious enough to give me their contact information. I'll call them. Okay, well, I'm not drinking now, right? I'm on the phone with another alcoholic. I feel a little bit better. I'm not drinking right now. And then I'm safe in the meeting. I always feel good there. And I'm there half an hour early. I'm meeting new guys that have even less time than me because it's never too early to help somebody. And then I saw my sponsor who I really trust and da-da-da. And then we're at pizza. I'm like, it's actually been kind of a good day, retrospectively.
Yeah.
When I've been like so obsessed with drinking. And then I fell asleep sober. It's a miracle. And then I just do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing as, when I started doing comedy and I was like, dude, I don't know how you guys are so good at this. It's so hard. Like, it's so hard. It's like you guys go up there and you make it look so easy. And then you go try it. It's like so hard. And then I just got better and better at it. And then I was like, well, what do you do? And they're like, well, we listen to our tape. That helps us work on the act. And then I write every day. So then that helps. And that's it. Like, real change is gradual. It's incremental in how I add.
Yeah.
Or take away from my routine. And you also have to try stuff to see if it works or not.
Yep.
I've tried, I'm turning into my aunt. My aunt is she's done every diet. You know what I mean? I got one of those aunts. It's either this one or that one or the paleo. I'm really turning into her. Where right now Whole Foods seems to be the move. Like Whole30's been great. That feels really good. It seems the most sustainable as well. We did keto and it works, but it's like you burn out hard. But you gotta try stuff. Yeah. Basically, that's what I'm saying. See what works for you. And again, that's why they call it a fitness journey. I hate that fucking term. I hate it. But it really, it is an accurate description. It's like, you're learning about yourself. Yeah. You really are. I think that's why they call it journeys. Because it's really the internal journey. A journey is supposed to, big adventure, but truly it's like you are learning about yourself. That's why they call it a journey. Yeah. And I think that's fair to say. To call.
Part of the reason you made me laugh so hard just now is because when I'm outreaching to candidates on LinkedIn or some other site who do not know me, instead of saying the classic, I have an opportunity for you, I've started toying with, is there a way that Cone Resonant can advance your career journey? And I'm always just
sure they love that.
But as soon as you said that about the fitness journey, my first thought was never say that again. Stop typing that. Take that out of all of my copyright. So I don't know. I'll think on it for a night or two.
Try on it, yeah.
One thing, first off, this is awesome. So thank you again for being here.
I'm loving it. Thank you.
For being so transparent. I really appreciate it. Good. I am too. One thing you mentioned a few moments ago was about the new person who doesn't want to be approached in the meeting, doesn't want to necessarily, maybe they get called on and they pass. They don't want to talk about their life. Let's talk about vulnerability for a minute. And I want to give you an example of someone who is dealing with something that has nothing to do with alcohol, but has everything to do with vulnerability. Back in 2021, a friend of mine hadn't been at the gym for a few weeks, and I found out later that it was because his brother had died much too young at the age of 32, about 17 days before Christmas. A year later, we were in the gym together, and the gym is his safe place. He's chest out, shoulders back, stands up tall and straight, and it just presents himself as a very confident individual. And I forget if it was on his brother's actual anniversary or if maybe it was a few days earlier, a few days before or after. Neither here nor there. The gym was very quiet that day, and I wasn't sure if I was going to see him again in the next couple of days. So I just asked him, "Hey man, your brother's anniversary was 1 year ago. How are you doing with that?" And it was crazy, Nat. His shoulders shrugged. He was sitting down when I asked him, and he sort of leaned forward a little bit and put his head down, and his eyes immediately teared up. And his whole his whole body changed, his whole physicality shifted. And he I think he sort of wrote it off a little bit and said, you know, I'm fine. I said, dude, you just teared up. And I only asked one question, and your whole demeanor just changed. And you know, clearly you're not doing okay. And he said, and he's like, all right, maybe I'm not. And I said, well, have you outside of me, because we talk about it occasionally, especially with how much time we spend in the gym. But I said, outside of me, are you talking with anybody about your grief? And he said, no. And I said, well, do you have someone, a friend, a family member, even me? Like, dude, I'm not a professional, but you want to go back to my place where it's private and we can talk about this for an hour? And he's like, honestly, I would have talked to my brother. He was my go-to guy. Whew. And so I told him, I was like, we need to get you talking to somebody. Like, why are you not talking anybody? Maybe even just speaking the words out loud could help. Because I believe in that. I think when you vent about something, there's a reason. I don't know if you've ever just vented, but like you feel better afterwards. And he said, that's not how my family raised me. We don't cry in my family. We suffer in silence. He had a very specific phrase. Either you grieve privately, you suffer in silence. But basically, he acknowledged the fact that I have this pain. And then he also acknowledged the fact that the way I was raised, the way that real men were raised, is that we don't talk about things that make us sad. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe that suffering and isolation is the way to go. So from your experience, you know, for someone like my friend, or for you know, people that you've come across who are younger than you in their AA journey, could you talk why it's important to get away from this, you know, I'm a strong individual, and why do you feel like there's a power in being vulnerable? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that the bravest people I know are the most honest. I think that is the bravest thing you can do, is be honest. Because it's very scary. It's very painful to do it, but it is where the truth lies. So it's like, and I think that so many larger issues stem from a lack of honesty. So as it relates to the alcoholic, it requires prayer, because most of the time it's, you know, the first person you have to learn to be honest with is yourself, right? And that's why so many people, man, you've seen it, I'm sure. You have people, it's like second, third DUI, and you're like, dog, you got to do something about it. And they're like, even myself. The window of willingness when it comes to recovery is fleeting. It's so small. It is the duty of someone who has recovered, or is experiencing recovery rather, because that's a debated term, recovered, to help keep that window open. It's a community effort. So I can't tell you, man, how many times I have hurt somebody that was in the way of my drugs and my alcohol, and then I use, and then I wake up just ridden with shame and guilt. I cannot do this anymore. I can't do it. I can't keep feeling this way. I can't keep causing this pain. I have to make a change. And then a few hours go by, and then a couple more, and all of a sudden, the conversation with yourself looks a little bit more like, maybe I was overreacting earlier. Maybe I'll just go see the guy one more time. We'll figure this out tomorrow. Something along those lines. That's the vicious cycle. I was approached by men in recovery that were like, I know how you feel. And I know you're scared. We felt the same way. A lot of the times it's on me to do the talking when I'm approaching the new guy. And rather than get into the nitty-gritty of where they're at, I just kind of share my experience, and that might make them comfortable enough to share theirs. So I just ask them, what are you doing? And they say, yeah, you know, I'm a couple weeks sober and stuff's going pretty good. I go, dude, you're so lucky, because when I was a couple weeks sober, I was scared for my life. I was terrified of drinking again. You know, I was terrified that I'm going to use again. This is going to be the last one because tomorrow is not guaranteed for guys like me. And they go, well, yeah, you know, to be honest with you, I feel that way a little bit too. Oh, okay, cool. I thought you were killing it based on what you're telling me. I remember specifically a couple of instances where it was really important, where so the day I got sober, there was one relapse a couple months later, but really what I count, and I don't count this as my sobriety day, I count the last day I ever used as my sobriety date. What I really considered the jumping off point was I went to a meeting, and I had been to a handful of meetings before where I wasn't paying attention, or I didn't have a sponsor, didn't do any step work. I was just there because some people said to be there. It seemed like a good idea, and I'd go. Sometimes I'd be high, sometimes I'd be sick. I went to a meeting, and I heard a guy speak, and for whatever reason, and I don't know if it was any different from the umpteenth shares I'd heard before, he spoke, and I related to him. Just like I couldn't believe. The stuff he was saying, it was like he took it out of my soul. You know what I mean? It was stuff, feelings, and emotions, and situations that I had never articulated myself that I related with. I couldn't believe how accurately he was telling my story through his lens. And I remember thinking to myself, I got to talk to this guy. Like, I got to. I've never really put any kind of real effort into this. I got to talk to this guy. And then my next thought was like, dude, you can't. You can't. Like, that's not what we do. What we do is we show up, we say hi and bye. Some guy goes, how you doing? Yeah, I'm good. And we go back home and we use, you know what I mean? And maybe we wake up and maybe we don't. And dude, I'm not even kidding. I remember it was so painful. It's like this gymnastics inside. I'm like, you got it. It's like the devil and the angel, truly.
Yep.
You got to talk to him. Just say hi. No, you can't. Keep isolating. Let yourself be governed by fear. That's your status quo. And man, I really don't remember how I ended up in front of this dude. I really don't. It was as though I levitated. Like it was as if I was pulled towards this guy. And he had never met me before in his life. And I'm like, dude, I relate so much with what you said. And honestly, dude, I'm struggling. And he's like, well, do you know the people here? This and that. I'm like, no, you're the only person I know. You know, it was a big meeting. And he was like, why don't we just, we can just get coffee tomorrow. And I'm like, I think I can do that. And we got coffee, and the guy became my first sponsor. And that dude, like, when he started to tell me, like, really how bad it was for him, and we just got into it on a really personal level, which is that same vulnerability I share, like, because he let it all hang out, you know what I mean? He had nothing boxed up. Yeah. And that's what we're taught to do in the program. We're like, you approach somebody with the truth, you know? You don't sugarcoat this thing. And he's like, you know what, man? What I found is that I know what's like to feel like you do. I feel much better. I got a life worth living, and here's how I did it. And that's it. And it was very attractive to me. And he didn't promote anything. Nothing was promoted. You know, I mean, he just led by example. So that's what I do, you know. And I think that this earnest approach is what promotes that vulnerability, you know, because this guy who has something that I want, he's being vulnerable with me. And he's got something I want, which I don't even know. I know I don't want to keep using and drinking. But what he really has that's the most attractive to me that I'm not even able to consciously kind of register because it's so foreign to me is he's got peace. And so I'm almost subconsciously attracted to that. He's got spiritual fitness, you know, with peace. So, yeah, that vulnerability is incredibly important for anything to happen. And I'll tell you, man, I've had a lot of moments like that since I've gotten sober where most of them, one of the sayings we say is that me personally, I grow at the rate of pain. So when the stuff's too heavy, that's when I let it go. Some stuff I see the writing on the wall. I've been taught how to do that in recovery. We're like, oh, you're exhibiting patterns and behaviors that are X, Y, and Z, and you got to do some work on that. Here are your old character defects cropping up. Here's the selfishness. Here's the self-centeredness. Here's fear working its way, taking your will back, etc., etc. Most of the time, I have to experience some pain before I can make the change. And so one other good example is I was in a car with a couple buddies. I was maybe 6 months sober, 5 months sober, something like that. And they were talking about a mutual friend of ours who just got nabbed. What's it called? Just stealing from a store.
Like shoplifting or something.
Shoplifting, which I was doing all the time. And they're like, yeah, it's a bummer for this guy. He's in trouble for shoplifting. Such a great guy. It's tough that he got in trouble for that. And normal Nat would be like, yeah, you hate to see it. But for whatever reason, it came out of me like involuntary. I was like, you know what, guys, I'm actually really struggling with that myself. And I've been really busy on this like not drinking and not shooting dope thing, but I can see that this is a problem as well. And I still do it. And they're like, yeah, that's a problem. You should talk to your sponsor about that. You should pray on that. And I did, and I stopped shoplifting, you know. And so every now and then I'll steal a pen. It's like a little guilty habit. Every once in a blue moon I steal a pen.
Where's my pins at?
I know.
They're these nice orange shiny ones too.
You're like, all right, we got on tape, officer. But so there's that, and there's been a lot of jackpots like that where the pain is unbearable. So I have to get honest. It's the only place where growth lies. Is honest. It's impossible if you don't identify the issue. You know, the keys to real change in this order are honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. You cannot do anything without those things. You have to know what's wrong or what's right. The open-mindedness, you have to hear another perspective, right? And then the willingness is the action.
Yeah.
To change.
I love that. It was honesty, openness. No. Open-mindedness and willingness. There's someone who's been contacting me, let's say, once every 6 months for 2.5 years. Graduated from college, looking for a job in his field. So he calls me about every 6 months and we talk about it. We look at his resume again. We looked at his LinkedIn again. We talk about his job search. And the first couple times we talked, I felt like he was half-assing his job search, but A, I didn't know if he actually was or not. And B, I didn't feel like I had that rapport to be honest enough with him. Mm-hmm. And when we talked about 2 weeks ago, I said, listen, man, here's the thing. I'm looking at your resume. I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile. I'm hearing the same sob story for 2.5 years. I feel like you're low-key wasting my time a little bit. I feel like you're not taking the instructions I'm giving you and running with it. I feel like you're not applying to as many jobs as you should. I feel like you're talk, excuses, apply for 1 or 2 jobs, call David again in 6 months and bitch about it. So here's what we can do. It's completely up to you. I can give you all the same advice over the next 20 minutes and we can waste my time. You can do nothing with it. And in 6 months, we can have another bitch fest. Or you can listen to me, apply some of these things, and I think you could have a job in the next 3 to 6 months. And he called me again the next day and he was like, I didn't sleep at all last night because you were the first person who just gave me a flood of truth and opened my eyes to the fact that I have been half-assing this job search and I haven't been giving it my all. He was finally honest with himself that it's not the job, it's not the market, it's not the other candidates are getting the job before him. He's just not trying.
Right.
You know, he is the epitome of doing a half-assed job search. So I think, to your point, being honest about where you are, whether it's getting to the gym, improving your financial situation, why you are or are not in AA. Be honest with yourself about why it's not happening. What was the second one? Why do I keep forgetting the second one?
Open-mindedness.
Being open-minded about, is there a better way to be doing this? Right. And then being willing to just actually take some action, especially if it's action that someone else is giving you. You were talking about behaviors and identifying potential problem behavior. How are we doing on time, by the way?
We're great.
Were you sure? Okay. There's this book called Upstream, and it's called The Quest to Solve Problems Before They Happen. And it's essentially a book of 12 to different 15 case studies. And one that I wanted to look at with you has to do with drunken teenagers in Iceland. So I picked out a few of my favorite paragraphs through this case study. Wanted to read a few of them to you and to the few people that are listening to this, and then talk about some different takeaways and just see if they're applicable or not. Sound like you got a game plan?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Here we go. So in 1997, a photograph was taken in downtown Iceland that would later become emblematic of a major national problem. It shows a city block jam-packed thick with people. The heads are mostly behind with a few brunettes sprinkled in. It's summertime in Iceland when the sun doesn't really set so much as to take a breather for a few hours. So even though the photo was shot at 3 a.m., all those faces are pretty easy to see, and almost every last person in the picture is a drunk teenager. The teens have overtaken this city. In 1998, 42% of Icelandic 15 and 16-year-olds reported having been drunk in the previous 30 days. Almost a quarter smoked cigarettes daily, and 17% had already tried cannabis. I remember having helped a friend of mine puke in an alley, said a physician who became mayor of the city in 2014, and another friend actually fell into the sea. This behavior went beyond normal teenage hijinks. Among 22 European countries, Icelandic 10th graders had the second highest rates of accidents or injuries related to alcohol use. They were near the top 2 in other disturbing categories: the percentage who'd been drunk at the age of 13 or younger, and the percentage who had been drunk 10 or more times during the previous year. To the Icelandic teenagers, this was all normal. It was the world they knew. But as the rate of substance abuse crept up almost every year during the 90s, a group of leaders grew concerned. So my first takeaway is what they said right here. To the Icelandic teenager, this was all normal. It was the world they knew. How can we identify what's normal behavior versus what might be a potential problem in life?
Well, it's really difficult. I mean, you can only, the only I don't know if this is relevant, but the only metric I have for change is how am I responding to life versus how I used to. So am I dealing with life on life's terms? In terms of like what is normal and what is not, I guess, with some ambiguity, you could say normal doesn't exist, but I think that I don't even know if normal is like the right framework. It's like, is this beneficial to you? I do abnormal things regularly that are incredibly beneficial to me.
Same here.
You know what I mean? I don't get any. I think most of the guff is indirect, but I'm a deeply spiritual person. I pray on a daily basis. A lot of people think that's very silly, and that's totally their prerogative too. I completely understand that. That's really abnormal behavior. People don't understand why I spend this 20 minutes in the morning centering myself. And the way I view my life is that I give it to a power that I don't understand. I try to remove my own self-will, which is crazy to most people, right? It's just what's worked for me. My self-will was really doing me no favors. So I don't know if that's what's best for everybody. I personally have found, like, I know people who are incredibly, here's an interesting example. So I think right now there's a big push culturally to maximize efficiency. I think you see that, and it's common in like the podcast space, and it kind of there's a lot of mediums and industries that are kind of bleeding into each other and bumping shoulders together, where there's this, like, I have a previous sponsor who really benefits from getting up at 5 in the gym till 6:30. He's got most of the day planned to a T. He's like one of the most like lovely, beautiful people I've ever met. He's just an A+ guy, and he really thrives in that. And then I know some people who adopt that same lifestyle, and they're real pieces of shit. And you would think with all this discipline and all of these regulated behaviors that I thought the goal was to be the best version of yourself you can be. Well, what are your goals? right? Are your goals solely to be the best entrepreneur, or would you like to be the best version of yourself possible? For me, the framework is, what am I doing to be of maximum service? And fortunately for me, this pursuit of my own passions within comedy, I get to be the best version of myself because I'm doing this for me personally. It's a thing that I love very much. I love my life doing comedy. And I think most of the people that I've been able to help, that they see that, and I think to some degree maybe they're attracted to it. Just in terms of like, Nat seems okay. And one of the reasons that I'm okay is that I get to do comedy. And the bigger reason that I'm okay is that, you know, I seek and practice spiritual behaviors. I didn't phrase that correctly, but you know what I mean. I spend a lot of my time in meetings and with other alcoholics. I do all this stuff that I've been developing over 5-6 years that results in a dude that people a lot of times want to be around and might ask for their opinion on their stuff, you know. I've taken a lot of people to their first meetings. And I don't really talk about recovery, man. It's like I barely have any jokes about it in my act. I've got like 2. They're not like defining of my act. It's not something that I rarely bring it up in conversation. It's just the way I carry myself, and it's all because of these practices. None of them are normal to the people that are asking me about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, my life in active addiction seemed the normal one. I talked to a buddy recently about quitting drinking, and he was like, yeah. He was talking about how boring it is. I go, oh, I'm actually very happy and excited sober. You know, I do a lot of fun. I have more fun sober than I've ever had drinking and drugging. And trust me, for a long time, I had a lot of fun drinking and drugging. I was big on like the music festival scene. I made a lot of money selling drugs. Like I had a great time, and then it all fell apart, and I wasn't able to sustain it. But when I saw him, I was like, yeah, you actually have the opportunity to be happy as well. That is something that we offer. He was like, well, that's impossible. And you're in a cult. And I was like, well, it can be possible, and I'm in a cult. That's possible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that if you want to get into semantics, it's not because there's an absence of profit motive. It's like it's altruistic by nature, and it's been audited before. We're doing pretty good in that.
It's funny you say that because in my head, I literally was just thinking, you know, I don't know what the literal definition of a cult was, right. So I wonder if we just Googled it, would AA technically fall? But okay, no, so there has to be a profit motivation.
Yes, and
got it.
And or an aspect outside of altruism, right? So there is no like a money or power grab within the program, even organizationally.
Right.
And anytime that does crop up, it's usually dealt with accordingly. If someone seems like they're in it for the wrong reasons, we usually nip that in the bud. But now, if you've never been to an AA meeting and you see us like holding hands at the end, saying prayers in unison, which there's certain prayers I opt out of. For example, a common prayer is the Lord's Prayer, which I learned early in my recovery was the same prayer that's recited when they were beheading Jews in the Spanish Inquisition. I chose not to say it. I'm not at all bothered by anyone who says it.
Right.
You know, I get it. It's just fucking weird. Yeah. It is a weird thing to do. It just works for me. That's it. You know what I mean? So I never promote it or push it or like I never, you know what I mean? It's like, you know where to find me if you're looking for me. Or if that's something you want to check out, that's cool. And if not, that's also cool. But I remember not thinking happiness was an option. Because how could you without knowing it? It's like those kids. It's like, I personally can't see myself. Like, I can't envision myself in, like, really great shape. I've been, like, the only time that I was, like, not big was because of just, like, naturally high metabolism at a young age. But I've always been, like, a chubby guy. And then, you know, getting into, like, we'll be 31 in a couple days.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like, we're trending up in terms of weight. So I know, like, real change is necessary for it, like, if I want to lose weight and get healthier, which I do, but it's like the willingness isn't all the way there. That's the truth. So it's hard to envision, like, a life as, like, a really in shape guy. Now, I've had dudes that were, like, bigger than me or unhealthier than me that are lapping me in terms of, like, shape and fitness and all that stuff. Like, I know it's attainable, but it's just hard to imagine. With it's the same thing when I got into the program and people were like, yeah, you know, they talk about the promises. You read the promises that are in the book. They're really lofty. Like, there is some really, like, some shit that it was unimaginable to me. Some of the stuff that they directly promise. All of them have come true. But that was like, I did the work regardless of my expectations of what would be given to me, because I had no other option. So I just did it. And everything that they told me was going to happen happened, right? So go figure. So, and, like, I know that if I eat healthy on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and I exercise, even a reasonable amount, change will occur. I've seen it before. So, but I understand, especially as a young person in this story, dude, I mean, you know, you came out at 26, but I'm assuming that you had relationships beforehand.
Nope.
No shit. Did you have heterosexual relationships beforehand?
Whew. So here's a good story that not many people know. So here we go, friends and family.
Yeah.
Being that I grew up in a Christian household, I started finding men attractive as early as 8 years old.
Yep.
But at 8, you don't know terms like horny or turned on. You know, I just remember, like, I would see men and something was different. I was being homeschooled at the time. And my 8th grade year of middle school, my parents thought it would be a good idea to put me and my siblings who were being homeschooled back into school so we could start getting socialized and whatnot. And as soon as I saw some of those football players, I just knew. I was like, holy cow. So then fast forward a couple years, and I was now 18 years old. And I very much knew I was gay at that point, but I had this vision in my head of, like, marrying a woman, having a couple of kids, and it would come out when I was like 15 years into the marriage. It would just destroy our family and be this big lie. And somewhere in my head, I got this idea of, like, before you come out or try things with a guy or anything like that, you've also never tried things with a woman. So start dating someone and try to have sex with her and see where it goes. So I started dating someone, and it was St. Patrick's Day, and we planned a little house party at her house where we were all going to go downtown for the day to downtown Sacramento, have a little party in the city, go back to her house afterwards. We'd have some food waiting, more drinks and whatnot. And so I had made sure to be drinking somewhat consistently throughout the day, because in the back of my head, I was already thinking, if this doesn't work out, I want something to blame it on. So I'll just blame it on whiskey dick, you know? And so at one point during the party, I grabbed her hand and we raced off to the bedroom, and I will spare everyone what happened behind closed doors that night, but I will just confirm that I do not like vagina. So now I'm dude, this is why I hope that somehow, like, this podcast gets through to, like, some 14-year-old so they don't go through what I did.
Yeah.
You know, at this point now at 19, now I know I like guys.
Yeah.
But I just spent the last 5 years going to a Christian high school where every Thursday we had chapel, and every Sunday we went to church. Man. And every Thursday and Sunday I spent praying to God to please let me wake up and find women attractive when I wake up tomorrow morning. So I was either 25 or 26, but it took me that 6 or 7 years to come out and to even start experimenting with guys, because I was terrified.
Sure.
I had no idea who I was. Well, I knew exactly who I was, but I was deathly afraid of, like, the second I come out, am I just going to burn up? You know, am I just going to break into ashes and God just smited David, you know? Yeah. So to answer your question, me and that one individual, we didn't even fully have sex that night. So to answer your question, I've never slept with a woman. I never experimented with a guy until I had come out to some friends and family.
Wow. That's crazy. That's a really, really great story. I really appreciate it.
I don't know about great.
No, it is. It's great and it's important. It's painful, but it's really important.
Yeah.
It's really important. I was. It's such a different world that it's the plight of having your whole life being raised in a very particular way.
Yeah.
That is adverse to who you are.
Yeah.
Bananas.
Yes, it is.
It is just nuts. I don't think people think about it enough, and that's why it's like it's so corny to say, but and maybe I'm just turning into a softie as I get older. But did you watch The Last of Us? Are you watching this show?
With the exception of Sunday's episode, I'm current. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So the gay relationship that is portrayed right off the rip, me and my girlfriend were. The reason that we were so emotional watching the show was not just because it was a beautiful story, the way they did it, but this is a really great piece of art that gets to depict normalizing something that is normal. Because there's just not a lot of stories out there, like in the public lexicon. It's like, yeah, it's because the focus was not that there's anything wrong or right with someone being gay. It was just a relationship. Right. And there's not enough of that. It's just a relationship. That's nothing more or less than any other relationship. And my girlfriend's like, and a good friend of mine, but her like best friend came out like to her, and it's like a dear friend of ours, and that's who we're thinking about when we're watching the show. It's like, it's for guys like Steven that can make this much less painful than it has to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or it doesn't have to be as painful as it is. Anyway, not to go on a tangent. The one I think the reason that I brought up the relationships in the past was, especially when you're younger, things are we think of things as much more like definitive than they are. So I remember getting dumped when I was 17 by a girl and thinking, oh, this is it. Right? That's it. I'll never love again.
It's over.
That's it.
She was the one.
My life is over. She's gone. It's meaningless now. Like, just, this is what, you don't know anything else. And, I got a buddy who just recently got out of an 11-year relationship that he's been in since he was 19. And I'm really glad that he's in a position where he recognizes, he's like, yeah, we outgrew each other. That's what happened. We were literally, we weren't formed adults when we met. How could we expect anything that, there's just no guarantees to this thing. So it's like, it just made sense. But because you just learn and you grow so much through various, but the reason I bring it up is that accepting something as normal, it's like, well, as soon as you lose a thing that feels good when you're young, how could you have the wisdom without the life experience? That's why it's so beneficial and helpful. That's why mentors in comedy or sponsors in recovery are so important. They're like, buddy, the tomorrow will come. You know what I mean? You have no idea what it will bring. And that stuff's so important. And I was really lucky to have that. I remember things that was like, oh, my life is over. And it's like, it just started.
Yeah.
How's your family taking you coming out?
My family took it fine. Do you believe me?
No, I do. You're telling me. Yeah.
No, they took it pretty good. So all my siblings found out through Instagram. I didn't have the courage to tell people face to face. So I just made a post and I rewrote it 27 times. I wanted it to be more like a love letter. This is all this is you guys are seeing a side of David that you didn't know when you woke up yesterday. And so my siblings, I'm pretty sure, all reached out to me within 24 hours. My mom wasn't on Instagram or she wasn't on social media. She never saw it. And I didn't realize that she didn't know. Fast forward a couple months, and it was Thanksgiving or Christmas or my birthday, but there is some event at her place. And I was going through different scenarios of how to tell her, should I take her out to dinner, take her to this spot, go on a hike? I don't know. I just wanted to be with her somewhere one-on-one where we wouldn't really get interrupted so we could talk about it, or if there's emotions, those could freely flow without us worrying about what was going on around us if we're in a busy restaurant. One of my few regrets in life was I was never able to find that courage. And so I got blackout drunk at whatever this event was, and I told her. So my siblings told me, and they also told me that she was pretty upset and that she cried about it. And I think she even called my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, and just needed someone to talk to about, I don't know, I won't speak to it. I wasn't there. I was there. I was asleep. So fast forward to COVID, and I had a stint of about 6 to 9 months in AA, worked the 12 steps, and one of my very first amends was to my mom. And my sponsor was thinking it would be good to make an amends to her about how you came out, and just see if there's anything else that she also needs to get off her chest. And so I remember I hit her up and asked if we could talk. It would need to be one-on-one. She said, sure, day, time, my place, come on over. So I showed up, and I told her, and it was awesome, man, because she said that she completely understood why I needed to get drunk in order to tell her. She was like, that must have been terrifying for you. Never held it against you for being drunk when you came out. And yeah, we're good. So can the rest of the siblings come back in, and can we start cooking dinner? And I thought it was going to be so much harder. She just was like, bam, nope, no big deal. She even made a comment that night about wanting just to be able to, looking forward to like meeting a future man that I would bring home. And if I ever wanted to talk about anything, feel free to talk about it. So it was pretty cool. Part of the reason I hesitated when you first asked me that question is because I haven't spoken with my dad in 7 to 10 years, with the exception of we crossed paths in May of 2022 for my sister's college graduation. I have no idea how much or how little he knows about my life. I don't know if my siblings talked to him about me. I have no idea if he knows I'm in Texas. I don't know if he knows that I'm gay. I don't know if he knows that I graduated college. Who knows?
So the connection's not there regardless.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. But yeah, no, they took it well. It was the friends, man. It was the friends who didn't take it well. I had a friend probably
Really?
What was that?
It's so crazy.
I had a friend of close to 9.5, 10 years who I hit him up one day and asked him if we could. It was a Thursday or a Friday, and we had been coworkers, friends, workout buddies, gone into social activities with each other, circles of friends. And I said, hey man, can we get the group together this weekend and go shoot some billiards, bowling, whatever? And he said, probably not this weekend, but would you want to grab coffee on Sunday morning? And I said, sure. And we met, and about 3 weeks before that, his girlfriend and I were at a Christmas party, and with a bunch of other people. And she asked me, what kind of boyfriend or what kind of man are you looking for? And I said, honestly, someone like yours, someone who's driven. He has his college degree. He's crushing it at work. He goes to the gym. He's in a relationship. Like, I really admire him. So fast forward to when we were getting coffee, and he said, my girlfriend told me about those comments that you made, and we were talking about it, and after talking about it for a little bit, we just feel like your and my friendship is based on the fact that hopefully one day you and me can have a go at it in the bedroom.
What a nut.
And from here on out, the only place that we feel comfortable hanging out with you is at church. So we probably won't be inviting you to things anymore, getting together with you on the weekend. And dude, that one in particular crushed my soul.
Yeah.
And then the timing was awful because it was right before COVID. This was in January of 2020. So
what a nut this
it was for me. I couldn't believe that I had attempted to pay him a compliment through his girlfriend, and she somehow misconstrued it to, oh, David wants to have sex with you. And it's
what an insecure little bitch, huh? That's so nasty. A nasty lady.
The fact that when I came out, my inner circle was primarily Christians who couldn't wrap their head around that concept of David's trying to navigate still going to church on Sundays while also being a gay man.
Yeah. I
couldn't wrap my head around it.
That's why I feel so fortunate to have like a independent relationship with a God of my understanding. You know, I mean, the It's actually interesting in the book specifically for Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a bit of a contradiction that occurs, because one of the things that we state explicitly in the steps is it's a God of your understanding, right? And I'm sure in your albeit brief relationship with the program, one of the things that was taught to you is like, it's your God and that's your business. However you choose to worship or whatever your relationship with whatever it is, that's yours. And we don't tell you what to think or do. That's pretty prevalent, and it's a core tenet of 12-step work. Now, there is some language in the book that's actually a little contradictory to that, where some of the text is, we believe that this road that we're on is inclusive to all, regardless of background, race, creed, social denomination, social standing, denomination, sexual orientation. It's all pretty much irrelevant to us. It's all inclusive. It's kind of this forever loving the thing, regardless of who you are. Now, it's kind of contradictory of your understanding, because maybe your understanding is a vengeful or hey, well, that's your business as well.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a thing where we're like, yeah, you can believe what you want, but our guy's he's cool with whatever. You know what I mean? It's this interesting thing where, albeit of course gross positive, it is actually a bit of a label onto a God, where it's like, yeah, our guy is cool with everybody. We don't care what you do, what you like, what you don't. It's a beautiful thing, but and what is your relationship with religion now?
I don't know, man. I have a Bible somewhere on this shelf behind me, same one that I've had for probably about 20 years now. I don't go to church, haven't been to church for probably about 18 to 24 months. I would not call myself an atheist. I think that deep down inside me, your timing is really funny, because when I got home from the gym last night, I pulled into the carport, and I don't know if you've ever had this random thought that's come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Just last night, I shit you not, I pulled into the carport and I turned off the engine. I was thinking, do you still believe in heaven and hell? If you had died on the way home tonight, do you think that you would have gone one direction or the other? I don't know, man. That's a interesting question to ask right now. If you were to ask me and I had to give a concrete answer, I would still probably call myself a Christian, but I don't like to publicize that, because it would be, I feel like it might be a little bit hypocritical, because I don't do anything to strengthen that. It'd be like if I said, oh, I want to have strong biceps. Okay, when was the last time you went to the gym?
Yeah.
It's been 18 months. I can make that claim because I was at the gym yesterday. That's a complicated question for me at this phase of my life, because I also I do believe that there's something out there working in the universe that brings people together, and there's just been some really specific moments in my life of either someone I've met or somewhere I've been or some really good thing that happened. It's like that can't just be coincidence, you know?
Sure.
So I don't know how to answer that question. Ask me in a year.
Sure. That's great, man. I think it's probably good that you're thinking about it at all. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm Jewish. Culturally, I'm Jewish. I feel like a Jew. I relate with Jews. And I am a Jew. I am a Jew. That's in my blood, whether I like it or not. And I love being Jewish. I don't really practice Judaism in any way. You know what I mean? I don't do any traditional Jewish things. But I feel like as much of a Jew as anybody, you know? That's just my personal experience. But the way I pray and worship is very different from anything that's laid out in the Torah or in various denominations of Judaism. Yeah, heaven and hell is an interesting one. I don't really have any opinion on that. It's not something I ever think about, you know? I just do. I just try to do good by people.
Yeah.
You know? You said something that... Yeah, I my whole thing is like... I I think spiritual anonymity is a really important thing, and what that means is that I don't really believe in anything 100%. And I think that that's a really good place for me to be. It allows me to really navigate with an open heart. And like, the only things that I really believe in is like love and tolerance and family. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I believe in this higher power, but the longer I've been sober, I have less and less of a definition of that same power, and I feel closer to it than ever. If that makes any sense. I feel it working in my life. I feel like I have a reciprocal relationship with God, and I have less idea of what that looks like or is or at all. Just none. And I don't really care either. You know what I mean? It seems good. It seems like we're okay with whatever. Me and him are good. Her, it, them, whatever. But that spiritual anonymity piece is so important to me. It's like, man, I just don't know anything. So it's like, other than love, which I feel like is the prevailing force, it's like, I could change my mind about any of the things I'm talking about, you know. But,
You know who Sam Elliott is?
yeah, love Sam Elliott.
He was on the Yellowstone spinoff 1883, and I was listening to a podcast about the show, and they had him on, and before the interview started, the actress that was going to be interviewing him said that it was so special to be able to work with him because Sam just was the epitome of having a heart of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And she said while he was on set, the way he treated every actor, the boom mic holders, the technicians, the prop, first off, he was just consistent. It didn't matter who it was. It was just kindness, kindness, kindness.
That's the best.
And just the way that he engaged with you and taught you and pushed you and tried to elevate you. And it was funny. Here I am just listening to this podcast for entertainment, you know, while I'm driving my car down the road. And that's something I'm striving for. And, you know, this was just like 3 weeks ago that I listened to this interview, and I thought that's going to be one of I'm not really a New Year's resolutioner. It's more of I hear something like that, and I think that's going to be my focus for the next couple of months. Because when I think back in my 20s and even my early 30s, I've been just downright mean and made decisions that were based either off of fear, anxiety, and depression. It wasn't based off of a place of love or a place of security. So that's my goal now, is that as soon as when I'm in the gym, if I see someone that I want to judge and I think like, oh, that douchebag is doing curls right in front of the weights and he's probably, cut myself off, and just think, maybe he had a bad day. Like maybe right before he got here, his significant other yelled at him, and he's so in his own head that he's not even at a place where he can think, I'm blocking these dumbbells. Right. He's just trying to get a fucking workout in because he got fired, and then his wife yelled at him, and maybe he's panicking about how to pay his bills for his kids. Let him fucking do his curls wherever he wants and stop judging him.
Right. Yeah.
He's just another human, David. Yeah. Like, can you be kind to the guy?
Yeah.
So that I just want to be like Sam, man. Yeah. I hope when I die, that's what people say, is that they just remember. If that's what's said about me when I go 6 feet under, I will rest in peace.
That's great. That's a great goal. It's an excellent goal, one that we share, and I think that on that vein, as unbelievable as it sounds, everybody that you've ever met is doing the very best that they can. Believe it or not, that's the truth. That's the best they can do. And there's no such thing as a bad guy. There's only sick people. You have some sickness. We're all sick in some way or another. No one is bad. And I really believe that. The worst people that we're talking about, I really believe they're just sick. And I usually do, I don't really have resolutions I set, but I do contemplate. I do think a lot about what am I doing, what am I providing, where can I improve. I think about these things a lot, and I think that's why some of my prayer practices are so important, because that's usually what I'm praying for. I don't pray for things. I pray to be of maximum service. I pray to practice honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I pray to seek opportunities to be of service, to act upon them when they're provided to me. You know what I mean? And I ask God what He wants me to do. That's it. You know, I usually get into it a little bit more because I peel back like, what's the problem? Why am I experiencing fear? delusion or whatever. And usually I can peel it back to the honesty, open-mindedness, or willingness, and that's it. Like, why am I letting fear govern myself? I can, through my prayer, peel it back, kind of get down to the root source. But in this last year of sobriety and in this next one, what I've been thinking a lot about is treating everybody as a child of God. Because that's what they are, whether they cut me off or not. As much as I want to be upset, as much as I want to continue to let my animal self take the wheel rather than the God-made self. Really, like, it's just me, you know?
Yeah.
We're all the same, man. Everybody. No matter how distant or... I was thinking about a sponsee who was annoying me the other day. I was like, dude, I was a fucking nut when I was in this kid's shoes. Like, so perspective is so big. It's the same entity, you know? I'm literally, why am I getting mad at myself? You know?
Yeah.
So that's what I think about a lot. Is am I viewing somebody as being my direct equal in every scenario? I stray from that quite often. I by no means so I want to paint a picture that this is something that I practice on a daily and momentary, like. But if I'm doing the right stuff, the sweetest times are when I get like we're all in this together.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I fail.
Any final comments?
I don't
anything
know.
else, man?
I think we really covered it. I'm trying to think.
Love people. Be kind.
Yeah, be kind. It's easier. You don't have to be nice, but be kind.
Yeah.
You know, it's just it really is easier that way. And you don't have to comment. A lot of times saying nothing is the best move, you know?
Yeah.
To anyone listening. It's one thing I learned here. Keep my mouth shut, and I still don't do it enough. That's it.
All right, everyone. Again, this has been Nat Rogachevsky. Yeah? Did I say it right? Chev Rogachevsky.
Yeah.
He's a local stand-up comedian here in Austin. If you happen to be in Austin and you hear this, try to find him, find out where he is. There any predominantly one comedy club that you're currently at, or are you sort of bouncing around depending on the time of year?
Yeah, I'm everywhere. I'm at Cap City often. I'm at Creek in the Cave quite a lot. I'm at Vulcan Gas Company often. I'm New Venue Kingdom. I'm there a bunch, but a lot of it's the independently produced stuff that you can see. Also, we're releasing the second episode of our sketch show, TV sketch show, on YouTube. You can find it like that, TV sketch show, and we're going to be having a premiere party with just like you saw, where we met, where we're airing an episode and having everyone involved.
And then just as a reminder, he's also the co-host of Slam Time Live, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Mm-hmm. He's funny, you guys. So look him up, whether it's in person or online. Check out the podcast. Check out TV Sketch Show on YouTube. Nat, thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Definitely. All right.